Hi, and welcome to our daily English news right here on TMH Live with me, Delithna Dawalko. The headlines for today include food aid in Ethiopia's Tigray now said to be at an all-time lowest. Chief of Staff on the Ethiopian Army has declared his forces will march on the Tigray region, and children in Tigray have been denied of routine immunizations due to the Ethiopian government's siege and blockade on the northern part of Ethiopia. The main news for today, the UN says food distributions in Ethiopia barricaded Tigray region has reached its all-time lowest. More than 50,000 children are now thought to be severely malnourished. The UN is calling this the latest sign of growing crisis amid efforts to end the country's 14-month war. Thursday's update by the UN humanitarian agency says food aid stocks and fuel are almost entirely exhausted in the region of some 6 million people, where a government blockade was imposed in late June 2021 of last year. Conditions under the blockade have become so dire that the international community of the Red Cross, in a statement this week, says some doctors in Tigray are using salt to clean wounds, handing out expired medications, and even reusing single-use items such as chest drains or gloves. The war also has affected Ethiopia's neighboring regions of Amhara and Afar, where rebuilding has begun after Tigrayan forces withdrew back into their region in late December. The UN update says more than 500,000 people in Amhara received food assistance during the week ending in January 12th. During that time, food aid reached about 10,000 people in Tigray, as stated by the UN. The humanitarian assistance need is rising expeditiously. Meanwhile, Chief of Staff of the Ethiopian Army declares his forces will march into the Tigray region. Asked why Ethiopia's military didn't pursue the Tigrayan forces into their region when they withdrew, General Ababaw Taddese on Thursday said that Ethiopia has concluded Part 1 in the war and that by definition, Part 2 is next. We will go there and discard the enemy. It's just a matter of time, he says, as he told the state-affiliated Fana Broadcasting Corporation. Member of Tigray Armed Forces Central Command, Getachew Reda, wrote on his Twitter account about that Ababaw Taddese's pronouncements appear to be a snub at Abiy Ahmed's public and declaration otherwise, a fact on which Getachew said the UN Secretary General's optimism was built on. On Wednesday, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, after a call with the African Union envoy leading mediation efforts, said he was delighted to hear there is now a demonstrable effort to make peace in Ethiopia. Getachew Reda said the positive tone of the UN Secretary General obviously flies full in the face of the reality on the ground. We are not losing sleep over Ababaw's plans, Getachew added. The recent shift in the war and talk of national dialogue was seen as an opening for further mediation efforts, and the new U.S. Special Envoy, David Stratterfield, was in Ethiopia on Thursday to meet with senior officials. The fighting continues, however, and several drone strikes have killed scores of civilians in Tigray in the recent weeks. The war combatants also include soldiers from neighboring Eritrea who are allied with the Ethiopian forces and blamed by witnesses for some of the worst atrocities in this ongoing conflict, as well as fighters from the Amhara who now occupy the western part of Tigray region. In light of Eritrea's involvement, any possibility of ending the war through any peace and negotiated settlements goes directly through Asmara, Eritrea's capital, of the leader of Tigray forces, Debretsion ገብረሚካኤል, wrote on Thursday in his piece to the Africa Report. Somalian troops committed atrocities in Tigray as new alliance emerges, survivors have said. Accounts of atrocities by the Somalian soldiers in Ethiopia's Tigray war are casting a spotlight on an emerging military alliance that has reshaped the Horn of Africa, weakening Western influence in the strategic important regions. The Globe and Mail has obtained eyewitness reports of the massacres by the Somalian troops embedded with the Eritrean forces in Tigray in the earlier months of the war back in 2020. The new evidence raises disturbing questions about covert military alliance between Ethiopia, Eritrea, as well as Somalia, and that has inflicted death and destruction in Tigray in the northern part of Ethiopia. Officially, the three governments have denied any alliance, and Somalia has denied that its troops were deployed in Tigray. But the Globe's investigation has provided, for the first time, extensive details of civilians killing committed by Somalian soldiers allied with Eritrean forces into this region. Gabrat Adik, a 52-year-old farmer from the village of Zabangadana in northern western Tigray, said the dusty roads of his village was strewn with the bodies of decapitated clergymen in December of 2020, a few weeks after the beginning of the war. Some of the priests and the monks were people he recognized, Somalian soldiers working alongside Eritrean forces who had captured the village, had targeted churches, and even killed the clergymen. He said they slaughtered them like chickens, as he told the Globe. The Somalian and Eritrean troops stayed in the village until late February, according to Gabrat Adik, who often fled to the bushes and mountains around the villages to escape attacks during that time. The Globe talked to dozens of survivors who had witnessed atrocities in 6 Tigrayan villages where Somalian troops had been stationed between early December 2020 and late February 2021. The survivors and the Somalian troops were wearing Eritrean military uniforms, but they were clearly identifiable as Somali because of their language, including their physical appearance as well. Unlike the Eritreans, they could not speak any Tigrinya, the language spoken in Tigray and much of Eritrea. The witnesses said that they also heard the Eritrean troops referring to them as Somalis as well. Last year, the UN and US officials said that they had received information that Somali troops were present in Tigray, but very few details were shown to prove. Somali parents had several protests in Mogadishu and other places in Somalia last year, complaining that their sons had been ordered to fight in Tigray after originally being sent to Eritrea for military training, and hundreds of Somalian troops were reportedly killed in this fight. Up to 10,000 Somalian troops were deployed into Tigray region, according to the current and former Ethiopian officials who spoke to the Globe anonymously. The unofficial military alliance among Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, orchestrated by Eritrea's Isaias Afwerki and believed to date back to the secret agreements after Abiy Ahmed came to power in Ethiopia in 2018, is a further blow to the declining influence of Western governments in the Horn of Africa. Parents and health workers say children in Tigray have been denied of routine immunizations due to the lack of medicine and equipment. They said denying access to humanitarian services is a crime against humanity and urged the international community to take practical action to end the siege immediately. As reported by Tigray TV, this notice outside the Office of Ethiopian Family Planning Northern Branch says the office had stopped the 45-day as well as the second and third rounds of routine immunizations due to the absence of medicine. Mothers in Ma'ala, capital of Tigray, they said they could not access vaccinations for their children anywhere in the city. Let's take a listen. He was vaccinated only once right after birth. I couldn't get access to the second round in our area of Kweha, and thus I was told to try in Ma'ala. Here too, there are no vaccines. It is not there at the Ma'ala hospital, nor is it at the family planning office. Our parents are disappointed by the negative responses that they're receiving. What will happen to all the children who are not getting their rolls of vaccinations? I'm going back home without immunizations for my child. I don't know what to do. I'm so worried. Sister Fitum Girmay, a nurse at the office of the Ethiopian Family Planning Northern Branch, said her institution had stopped immunizations due to the lack of supplies and medicine as well. We used to vaccinate between 80 to 110 children a day, 3 days a week. Now, the children are not even getting their necessary immunizations. She also said that unvaccinated children could be exposed to various diseases. Sister Fitzum said the long-term health risks to no immunizations could be the outbreak of various diseases in front and the form of the pandemic. Routine immunizations have stopped across Tigray's basic services, including health facilities, have damaged, destroyed, or otherwise stripped of essential supplies. Sister Fitzum and the parents called on the international community to take practical action to end the blockade that's been imposed in their region and has deprived the children of Tigray access to critical and health services like immunizations. Our last news for today includes former leader of UK's Labour Party makes an impassioned plea for an end to what he called a humanitarian disaster of massive proportions in the Tigray region. During his speech at the Westminster Hall debate in the situation in Ethiopia, Jeremy Corbyn, who's also a UK Parliament member, urged the UK Parliament to send a strong appeal to the Ethiopian government to allow unhindered humanitarian access into Tigray.
As the member for Tewkesbury pointed out, is a humanitarian disaster of massive proportions. The figures are horrendous. You're looking at 9 million people that are short of food. You're looking at least 400,000 that are literally starving. You're looking at a lack of medical supplies. You're looking at a prevention of trucks getting into Tigray with the food, the medicine, and all the other necessities of daily lives that the people of Tigray want. Many will die as a result of this. Many will lose their lives, and children will grow up with stunted growth and development, and the resentment will be there for all their lives of those that stopped the necessary aid getting in there.
To make an appeal to the Ethiopian government to allow the UN Human Rights Council and the Amnesty International Human Rights Watch unfettered access to all aspects of society in the war ravaged by this crisis. He called for the protection of civilians against the ongoing systematic abuses and sexual violence that's taken place in the region. And in a related development, veteran member of the UK Parliament and prominent politician Vicky Ford, during her visit to Ethiopia, has said this week pushed her efforts to creating a lasting peace for the response of humanitarian needs across the entirety of the country. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.